Freedom is the most potent opium ever distilled. Simply grant the masses the illusion of choice, and watch as they voluntarily slip the yoke over their own necks in a fit of jubilation. There is no need for whips or chains. One only needs to paint a shimmering vision of a world where anyone can ascend to royalty and then charge an admission fee to the dream. The happiest slave is the one who never realizes he is imprisoned and who is even willing to tear apart anyone who dares to wake him. This is the absolute zenith of the art of ruling. A system where exploitation is draped in a magnificent cloak labeled liberation. If we look back at the economic landscape of half a century ago, a man earning an average wage could support an entire family, buy a home, own a car, and provide his children with a decent education. Today, however, two people toiling relentlessly from dawn to dusk still struggle to cover the rent and service their credit card debt. Was this some strange miracle, or a masterfully executed sleight of hand by those who control the game? It is, quite simply, the ruthless law of supply and demand. When the labor supply suddenly doubled, the value of that labor was mathematically halved. Yet, the cost of living did not decrease. It surged exponentially because households now possessed two sources of income, and the market immediately adjusted its prices to siphon off every last cent. The outdated model of the man working while the woman stayed at home was a constant irritation to capitalist tycoons and tax architects. Why leave half the population economically dormant according to the cold metrics of GDP? A woman at home raising children, cooking and cleaning generates immense social value. But that value cannot be converted into taxable cash, and more importantly, she doesn't spend enough money. A housewife who knows how to save, sew, and cook at home is the natural enemy of consumerism. They needed to lure her out of the kitchen, not out of empathy for the smell of cooking oil on her clothes or a genuine desire for gender equality, but because they needed her in factories and offices to generate surplus value pay taxes and become a tireless consumption machine. But humans are inherently stubborn. They cannot be forced from their homes by mere administrative decree. They must be enticed. A grand narrative, powerful enough to stir the soul, had to be manufactured. Thus, massive media campaigns were born, funded by multinational corporations. They rebranded cigarettes as torches of freedom, reframed office attire as the armor of the modern female warrior, and successfully cast the kitchen as a symbol of confinement and backwardness. Leaving the home was no longer presented as an economic necessity. It became a prerequisite for dignity. Who would choose diapers and dirty dishes over the bright lights and climate-controlled comfort of a modern office? Society began to measure an individual's worth by the title on their business card, rather than the peace in their soul or the quality of their family's meals. A successful woman is now defined by her ability to withstand sales pressure, her stamina for drinking with clients, and her capacity to buy luxury items to compensate for the void of time she cannot spend with herself or her children. The most spectacular scam of all is that, upon stepping out into the world, the domestic burden does not vanish as promised. It merely shifts or becomes a double burden, crushing fragile shoulders. The modern woman is expected to be a decisive, sharp-witted executive in the boardroom, a gentle and resourceful mother at home, and a passionate lover to keep the embers of marriage glowing. The pressure to be flawless on every front has made sedatives and psychotherapy sessions more lucrative than ever. Financial freedom is traded for mental exhaustion. Children are surrendered to nannies, schools, or the cold glow of an iPad screen, while the busy mother is away building someone else's dream. Family bonds gradually fray, leaving behind lonely, alienated individuals within their own homes. And lonely people are the most profitable targets for the retail therapy market. They shop to fill the emptiness, seeking a fleeting hit of dopamine to mask their chronic stress. One only needs to look at the explosion of the beauty industry, fast fashion, and processed foods to see how the strings of profit are manipulating the puppets. If women stayed in the home, who would buy expensive lipsticks to look refreshed after 8 hours of staring at a computer? Who would buy seasonal office wardrobes just to avoid the judgment of colleagues? Who would rely on canned goods and delivery services if there was still time and energy to cook? Liberating women from the kitchen opened the floodgates for billion-dollar industries to invade private life, turning every insecurity into a gold mine. The fear of being judged on appearance in the workplace has become the most powerful incentive to spend. Not wearing makeup is deemed unprofessional, lacking designer labels is low class, and carrying an out-of-date handbag is seen as a failure. Standards of beauty are molded specifically to serve sales. Freedom of choice? Or merely the choice between which brand to buy to hide the exhaustion etched into one's face? In the men's game, women are not the favored participants the media's flowery slogans suggest. They are fed into the capitalist meat grinder like everyone else. Capitalism has no gender. It is indifferent and ruthless, distinguishing only between profit and loss. If hiring a woman is cheaper, and if she works harder, more meticulously, and more submissively, the system will chant the praises of feminism to the heavens. Conversely, if maternity affects her output, the system will eliminate her under sophisticated legal pretexts or create an environment so hostile that she withdraws of her own accord. Slogans about workplace equality are often just a glamorous coat of paint over a more thorough exploitation of labor. Encouraging women to devote themselves entirely to their careers is essentially encouraging them to sacrifice their living time, reproductive health, and personal happiness in exchange for soulless figures in a corporate year-end report. The trend of deifying iron ladies and independent girl bosses spreads across social media like a new religion. But look closely at what is actually being celebrated. It is the image of people working 16-hour days, sacrificing sleep and genuine relationships for likes and the fleeting admiration of strangers. The system requires these icons to inject psychological fuel into the weary, laboring masses. There must be someone at the front holding the flag, so those behind them believe that if they just keep running, they will reach the finish line. But that finish line is constantly receding, pushed back by inflation and bottomless greed. Financial independence becomes a sweet trap when the price is total dependence on the corporate machine. Stop working and you stop eating. Stop contributing and you are discarded instantly. The apron of the past might have been stained with grease, but the suit jacket of today is stained with cortisol and the constant anxiety of being replaced by a younger, cheaper hire who is ready to bleed more for the company. The disintegration of the traditional family structure is no accident. It is the inevitable byproduct of an economy that needs isolated individuals to optimize purchasing power. A large family sharing one refrigerator, one television, and one home-cooked meal consumes far less than independent individuals, each with their own apartment and their own set of appliances. Promoting radical independence and the reign of the individual ego is the fastest way to break society down into single consumption units that are easily manipulated. Women are encouraged to love themselves through shopping, travel, and luxury services, rather than seeking happiness through connection and sacrifice for others. The very concept of sacrifice is now ridiculed as stupidity, while self-indulgence is hailed as wisdom, a perfect inversion of values designed to keep the money flowing. Even the movements fighting for women's rights have been thoroughly commodified. T-shirts bearing feminist slogans are stitched by exploited women in the third world for pittance wages. Seminars on female leadership are sponsored by corporations with the most abysmal records of discrimination. Feminism has become a commodity, a marketing trend, and a hashtag for engagement rather than a genuine struggle for dignity. They sell feminism the same way they sell a bottle of soda. It feels refreshing for a moment, but it is ultimately full of artificial sweeteners and empty fizz. Women have been granted the right to work like beasts of burden alongside men, the right to be perpetually stressed, the right to suffer from cardiovascular disease and strokes, and the right to be lonely at the summit of their careers. Is this true liberation or merely an expansion of the slave camp? Ultimately, there is nothing inherently wrong with women working, earning, or asserting themselves. That represents undeniable progress. What is terrifying, however, is the naivety of believing this was a gift of social kindness, or that the system truly cares about the happiness of half the world's population. Everything has a price. This deal was struck long ago, and the profits have already been divvied up by financial and political titans. The solution is not to complain, or demand a return to the cramped kitchens of the past, but to soberly recognize where the strings are pulling us. Real empowerment does not lie in straining to mimic men or becoming a perfect money-making machine for consumerism. True power lies in the ability to see the entire chessboard, knowing when to advance and when to retreat, knowing how to refuse the absurd standards society imposes, and most importantly, refusing to let empty slogans dictate the value of one's own happiness. In a world of puppets, the one who sees the strings is the only one with the hope of finding an exit, or at least the one who knows how to dance in a way that hurts their feet the least on this thorny stage.